He's internationally acclaimed games designer. He's a science fantasy author and creator of the best-selling interactive adventure series, Lone Wolf. Joe, lovely to meet you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for the invite. Thank you.
I think this all started, really, for you back in the 70s when you left university. Is that right?
Sort of, perhaps even before then. I mean, I've always been a games designer at heart, and I've always dabbled with a bit of creative writing as well. But when I left college, I became a musician, so that wasn't really my primary career track, as they would say these days. But I never lost it. I kept with games design. It's sort of come full circle now.
Now, the Lone Wolf series is perhaps the thing that most people will recognise you for, if not here in the UK, certainly in the States, where it's enormous, isn't it? Astronomical sales. Who are the books targeted at, Joe, would you say? Obviously youngsters.
Yes. Yeah, the average reader would be 13 to 14 years old. I get letters from readers all the time, and they're probably a spread of 9 to 16 is what my publisher would say the target market.
Now, I'm just a shade older than that.
Just a shade.
Just a shade. So tell us all about Lone Wolf and the creation and the character and the books and the series.
Right.
What's it all about?
Lone Wolf is a science fantasy adventure, very much in the mould of King Arthur, Beowulf, Lord of the Rings, a straight science fantasy. What makes it very different is that the reader is the hero of the story. I've constructed the books in such a way that you, as the reader, take part and make the main decisions throughout the story. And also, it doesn't end at one book. You carry over your decisions and things you may have found and people you've met to the next book in the series, and so on.
Now, that's a clever piece of marketing.
Yes, it wasn't originally targeted as that, but the publishers certainly caught on to that aspect of it. It certainly helped with the longevity of the series. It first came out in '84, and it's been selling well since.
Now, how does that work then? You know, when reading the book, how can you make these choices? How does it work?
Well, I write in a tense called second person tense, which is I'm writing for the reader. I'm saying what is happening to you at any stage of the story. And each section of the story may be a paragraph or two, and at the end of that you're given decisions to make depending on what's happening to you at any stage. Now, depending on the choice you make, you change the story, which is the nice plus is that there are several stories contained within each book, so if you went back to the beginning and took a different route, you would end up with a different story. The trick is constructing it so that it runs and runs. It runs for a whole saga, a whole lifetime, in fact. That, hopefully, is what I've managed to do.
The current Lone Wolf is, if I can call it, volume 25.
It is, yes.
It's called Trail of the Wolf, and already the next one, The Fall of Blood Mountain, which will be the 26th, is on its way.
Yes, that's due out in the summer.
It won't be long.
No.
You must have a very active mind.
Yes, yeah.
Or should I say interactive mind?
Interactive mind would be very accurate, yes. That goes back to the game design. I mean, I've been a games player and a games lover since my early teens. And really, I've very much enjoyed science fantasy at that age as well. I'm just fortunate that I hit on the idea of combining the two, combining the game system with science fantasy writing, and making a hit of it, I guess.
I wonder what it was in your early childhood that sparked off this love of games. Can you remember your favourite childhood game? I mean, most of us remember playing sort of box. I mean, dare I say things like Ludo and Snakes and Ladders. Certainly, and then yes. Monopoly, yeah. But I wonder what yours were.
Funnily enough, I always ended up designing games for my friends. I was an only child, so that probably has something to do with it, entertaining myself. But looking back on it now, I can see it was all plotted out. It was all mapped out. My future was mapped out. In those
so Monopoly
days.
Was never good enough for you then?
Monopoly was very predictable, and I wanted something that was perhaps a little bit different to Monopoly, and that's what I went for.
So you can't remember anything from your early days, other than your own creations?
Yeah, so familiar stuff that your listeners would be familiar with: Cluedo, Scoop, Monopoly, a lot of the board games. And a lot of games that I made up using old Airfix soldiers and sort of early war game type games that I would design for other people.
Yes,
there's the strategy. There's the strategy aspect to it. Yeah.
Of course, if you were younger these days, today, you'd be right into computers. I mean, you're already heavily involved with computer games, but if you were just finding your feet in the marketplace, it's computers now, isn't it?
It has, yes. The very powerful computers that are available these days, certainly since '94 onwards, have changed the game scene dramatically. I'm involved in computer game design almost full time now. I still write. I probably write 2 books a year on average. But the mainstay of my working day is computer design, interactive computer games design. And it's fascinating. I mean, I get to work with a team of people rather than in glorious isolation, as they say. And it's very challenging. It really has all the aspects of film production these days. It's such an intriguing and all-encompassing fact.
I imagine, I've never tried it, but I imagine you would have to think of so much to get it right. It's all very well developing the plot, the story, because games have these now.
Certainly.
The characters, but visually it's got to be exciting, hasn't it?
It has, yes.
We expect the computer screen to come to life, and of course that's very difficult.
Well, as a computer games designer, I have to envisage the finished game right at the start. Certainly I put as much work into computer games design as I do my novels, possibly more. But the nature of it is very much a teamwork nature. It's working with other people, each with their own specializations, and that I enjoy, actually, because like I say, I'm usually in isolation when I'm writing either interactive books or novels, and it's nice to get out and meet other people now and again.
I always find it interesting to try and work out how one arrives at the lifestyle one has, especially somebody like you, Joe. If we look back at your education, your your school days,
certainly, yes.
I mean, what were your best subjects? Had to be sort of science-based.
Yeah,
English and
yes.
science-based?
Not so much science. I mean, I did dabble with chemistry for a while until I nearly blew up my bedroom. So I gave that a knock on the head. But certainly English was my first love.
So you left school with A-level English?
That's right, yes. I went to Buckers Hill County High, and then went on to North East London Poly and did my A-levels. There was talk of me going on to university beyond that, but I had an offer from Pi Studios to become a resident engineer with a resident musician with their studio orchestra, and that seemed very glamorous. I mean, the money was good, and I was getting to do what I wanted to do, and it made me remember what an English tutor had said to me. Really, the key to enjoying your working life is to first figure out what you're good at, what you excel at, and what you really enjoy doing. And the second, and probably the toughest aspect, is to find somebody to pay you for it. So I've taken that advice to heart ever since and pursued that aim.
It sounds as though you have. Now, the keen listener at home, and I hope you did manage to pick that up, not only then have we got a novelist in the studio, a computer games designer, a man with a very active mind, we've also got a musician.
Yes, I still dabble as well.
Do you?
Yes.
What do you play?
I play electric bass. Originally I played string bass, but it got a bit much lugging a string bass around the underground in London, so I went electric, and I've stuck with it ever since.
Yes, that's an interesting topic for conversation as well, the way that electronics now mimics the authentic sound of instruments.
Very much so, yes.
Are you pleased with the way the electronics deals with the double bass, for example?
I can't fault it. I mean, I use samples of double bass when I'm constructing. Well, this is another thing I do. I compose and construct scores for the audiobook versions of my novels. So we'll have somebody come to read the story, but behind the scenes I'm doing the mood music, if you like. So it really is just an excuse to enable me to dabble in my first love.
You see, because when we look at your life evolving here, we can almost predict the future from what was going on, because there you are, you're a musician. You then went from being a musician with Pi, you moved into the engineering side of the business, I think with Virgin, didn't you?
Yes, that's quite right. At the end of the 70s, early 80s.
What did you do there?
I was a recording engineer with their Axe signed to the Virgin label in the late 70s and early 80s. I was a resident studio engineer at the Manor Studios in Oxfordshire, and sometimes at the Townhouse, which is still in Shepherd's Bush, London.
So that means sitting at something like we're sitting at here in the studio.
Very much so, yeah. It looks
a thing that I think you call a mixer. Is it something like that?
Well, a mixing desk.
Mixing desk.
Certainly, yeah.
And you're balancing the sounds of the instruments and the voices.
That's right, yes.
From the performers to the side.
And then helping with the final mix on the album.
That's interesting as well. I mean, we don't want to name names perhaps, but sometimes I'm told that recording artists can be rather fussy and particular about the end result, the product.
Oh, very much so, yes.
And the engineer, of course, is often the man or woman, where the criticism is levelled. You didn't get that mix very right, did you?
Yes.
Did you have
it's a case of blaming the tools, I think, if I dare call myself that.
And the other thing as well is, as consumers enjoying the music at home or here on the radio, we don't quite realise the intricacies of it all. For example, if you've got half a dozen instruments, the saxophone has got to be at the right level.
It has, yes, getting the right balance, the right tone, the right timbre, the right sound. Drum kits are a notorious problem. Well, they used to be in the late 70s. Now there are electronic drum kits that sound exactly like acoustic drum kits. So it's a whole different kettle of fish.
Would you say it's easier today than it was then?
No, I wouldn't, actually. I wouldn't. There's just an awful lot more technology to
You took a few
master.
seconds to answer that one, didn't you? Yeah.
It's slightly different, but the basis remains the same. It's down to the quality of the artist and the composition.
Which brings us nicely, perhaps, onto your choice of music.
Yes.
What have you chosen today, Joe?
I've chosen the theme to film 97, which is I Wish I Knew. I'm sure your listeners will be very familiar with this.
Is there any particular reason for this?
Yes, it's for my son Ben, who's in the middle of his GCSE exams at the moment, and he'll be going on to college in September to do film journalism. So this one's for you, Ben.
An opportunity to hear the whole of that. The Billy Taylor Trio. I Wish I Knew, the theme from film 97. And the choice of the BBC Essex Theatre guest today, Joe Deaver. Yeah, great. I hope Ben enjoyed it too.
Yes, I'm sure he will.
Yeah, studying hard.
He is, yes, putting in the hours. That's good.
Let's hope so. We ought to talk a little more about the Lone Wolf series,
yes.
the book series. We've reached, the next one is number 26.
Yes,
how many in the
published.
series do you think
There will be 28 in the series. That's how I designed it, so we're nearing completion. I have, in fact, completed the series. I've written the series. It is now in the can. And 27 and 28 are out next year.
So what happens after that?
I take a bit of sabbatical, I think, on Lone Wolf. Personally, I'm very much, as I've said, very much involved in computer games design, and I'm working hard on an internet game at the moment, which is an internet city that you can visit.
An internet city?
An internet city that is full of intrigue. I think perhaps the best way to explain it would be to draw an allegory with The Prisoner, the old TV series, Patrick McGurn TV series.
Oh, so popular even today.
Yes. The similarities are that it's a very strange place that I'm designing, and you can visit this place through your personal computer, modem, internet link, whatever, and then try and figure out what's going on. And so you can stumble into this place and visit and revisit as often as you like, and it's full of conspiracies and subplots and intrigue, and you become one of the main characters in this city. And so it evolves. You can shape yourself. You'll design yourself and interact with other characters. And, well, a good time should be had by all. Let's put it that way.
When it comes to designing something like this, to creating something like this, do you do this alone, Joe, or do you have a lot of help?
Well, the initial creation of it really is down to me, I suppose. I start the ball rolling, but it's not a solitary project as a novel or a game book would be. I work very closely with programmers and graphic illustrators and artists to put together the feel and the shape and the size of this thing. We play test it at various stages, and it's usually a 2 to 2.5 year process. So it's quite a long process before it's actually released.
Yes, because whenever I've tackled a computer game, I mean, the computer always wins. but there are those who really want to take the computer on and want to beat it.
This current project is slightly different because it's more of an ongoing soap opera rather than a one-off game that you're trying to beat. It's more collaborative and interactive. It's very new, let's put it that way. There's nothing quite like it out there, which is one of the big appeals. And it's probably making it a little bit hard for me to explain fully what it's about.
I think most of us are following.
Okay.
It was just I perhaps misunderstood because I thought we'd have to escape the village, but that's perhaps not the intention. Then.
Not really. You contribute towards this city. In fact, you shape it. You design your own apartment, your own place of business. You have your own income from this business, and as you shape it, so it remains permanent. So you make your mark on this place that will last indefinitely.
It's almost a fantasy of real life for many people, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's It should be. We're hoping it's going to be very popular in the States, obviously. I mean, my name is known there, and there is certainly a market for this type of game there. I think the key to that, frankly, is simply they do not pay for local telephone call charges. So, in theory, I mean, you can just switch on your internet connection and remain online indefinitely at no, apart from obviously the cost of the provider. That's
the telephone cost is zero.
Yes, the actual call rate is zero. So. And
well,
what we know from fact that there are people out there that spend upwards of 12 hours a day on these games. So
we hear that
something
like that might end up in the UK, free local calls.
Possibly with increased competition. We'll see.
We'll wait and see. How many hours a day would you say you sit in front of a computer, Joe?
When I'm busy on a project, it can be upwards 12, 14 hours a day. But I have to schedule time to think about what I'm doing. I have to, sort of what I call downtime. And I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear that I listen to your show very often in the afternoon, Steve, while I'm thinking of new plots and twists and turns.
Good man. Do you ever use the computer yourself for fun and for playing games?
I suppose I do, yes, because I need to stay abreast of what else is out there and what potential competition is and what innovations have occurred in the games design field and so on. But I love playing games, so that's not such a hard job to do.
He's one of these smart Alexes. We never play with a computer game with Joe Deaver, because I reckon you'll always beat us,
Well, yes, I guess.
If you'd like to meet Joe in person, he's book signing in Brentwood on Saturday. That's the 7th. You're doing this at Ottica's, aren't you?
That's right, yes. Ottica's in the High Street, between 12 and 1.
And then later that day, in the afternoon, you're giving a talk.
I am, yes. A bit of a lecture, a bit of a talk at the Memorial Hall in Brentwood, Brentwood School. And so if there's anything you want to know about writing adventure stories or games design, or you're just intrigued about my work, then please do come along. 2:30 it starts.
2:30 to 3:30. It'll cost you £2 on the door. The question-answer session is scheduled for 3:30. And don't forget, the latest book, Trail of the Wolf, Lone Wolf 25, is out now, and the next one, The Fall of Blood Mountain, which is number 26, will be out soon, published by Red Fox, I think.
That's correct, yes.
At £4.99. It's out, in fact, on the 14th of August, I've just been told. And what's the next game going to be called? Because there is one about to be...
Yes, I've got a game that is scheduled for release in September for the Sony PlayStation, and that's called Spiral Saga. And that's... straight down the line science fantasy, a real King Arthur sword and sorcery epic. 2.5 years in the making and due out in September.
I wonder how long it'll take people to play it for as long as...
2.5 years.
And beat the system.
I think probably about 600 hours of play. That's what we've estimated, so it's good value perhaps.
My Tea at 3 guest today, Joe Deaver.
Thank you very
nice
much.
Nice meeting you, Joe. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks.